Now, not a robot, but Australia's self-confessed geek Prime Minister was loved and then loathed over the course of his political career. Kevin Rudd, who was twice the leader of Australia's Labor Party, retired from politics last month after losing the general election to Tony Abbott and his right-wing coalition. His return to power was overshadowed by political infighting, rows over sexism and questions about his temper and leadership style. Now, though, the former Australian Prime Minister is trying to cast himself as a global statesman. Tonight, Kevin Rudd will give yet another speech on China's place in the world. The frequency of his international forays since he quit domestic politics last month has even led to suggestions he fancies his chances at the helm of the United Nations. Rudd received plaudits for successfully steering his country out of the financial crisis, but his stewardship of his own party won fewer supporters. He was ousted by his colleague Julia Gillard in 2010 after his popularity plummeted.
We have thrown our absolute all at this.
The Conservative opposition had a field day, launching a misogynistic campaign which Gillard confronted powerfully in Parliament.
The government will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. If he wants to know what misogyny looks like in modern Australia, he doesn't need a motion in the House of Representatives, he needs a mirror.
And behind the scenes, she fought back too. Recently leaked emails from her advisor John McTiernan, who used to work in Downing Street, reveal not only his liberal use of the C word, but also his deployment of a Twitter army to attack political opponents.
Politics is a contact sport. Australian politics is almost certainly more robust than British politics. It happens in a shorter cycle, an electoral cycle of 3 years. I think the things that we'll be learning from Australia are, the importance of big vision in policy, the importance of social media, and the importance of on-the-ground campaigning.
But it was all to no avail. She was never forgiven for ousting Rudd, who then returned the favour, ejecting her as leader just months before the election. He lost the poll and quit politics. But does he now have his eyes on an altogether loftier goal? Well, earlier I sat down with Mr. Rudd and asked him about that lofty goal and what he thought was the best way to engage with China.
China, of course, has its own unique history. And to be fair to the Chinese, they've never been in the business of going out and invading people, even when they were capable of doing so in imperial times. But in Asia, they are very active diplomatically, in political terms, in military and economic terms. And around the world, we sense their presence more and more as well. The key challenge for the rest of us is how do we respond? Recently,
David Cameron went on a trip to China and was accused of sort of adopting a grovelling approach. In your view, how nice, to put it bluntly, do we have to be to this emerging superpower?
I am actually an optimist that we can carve a way forward with the Chinese, which preserves the fundamentals of our international rules-based order, but allows more new voices around the table, reflective of their size and importance in the world.
But consistency and firmness rather than sort of kowtowing, to use an appropriate word.
It's neither hot nor cold. There's always a danger with China that Western politicians are either in love with them or in hate with them. I regard it as just a normal relationship, profoundly complex, and also one which, of course, in the 21st century sees its future as well and truly ahead of it.
So possibly a bit too much kowtowing from the UK recently.
I make no comment about Her Britannic Majesty's government. That's a matter for you good Brits to look after yourself.
You've just been through this very bruising election campaign. Ed Miliband's got one coming up. There's the right-wing press has been pretty vicious in its attacks on his personal background. I mean, the Daily Mail, right-wing tabloid here, headlined a piece about his father saying the man who hated Britain. What advice would you give to him about how to handle those kind of attacks and that kind of bruising campaign?
Is this what we describe, Cathy, as the inelegant segue from the world to domestic British politics?
I thought it was very elegant.
Look, I think the last thing Brits want is a foreigner like myself to provide them with external counsel. Britain, I would make this simple point about where Britain goes for the future, and I take this from a global perspective. As I see it, Britain's future lies in Europe. What the world needs is a strong Europe, and you can't have a strong Europe without a strong Britain in Europe.
What about sexism in Australian politics? So Julia Gillard recently talked about a really violent, ugly sexism that she believes she was exposed to. She really was appallingly treated by the opposition, by society, and even by you.
The question of sexism, I think that is a challenge for women in our society, and from my engagement with British society, women here from time to time as well. I know many women in British business and positions of political leadership here who find it often hard going.
But her treatment was something else entirely, though. I mean, the placards of "Ditch the Witch" by, you know, from the opposition. I mean, that was, I've not witnessed anything on that scale here.
There was extraordinary sexism towards Julia in that period. This should be a simple non-starter in the 21st century, and particularly in our sophisticated democracies.
There's been quite a bit of speculation that the reason why you're talking about these kind of issues, China-American relations, etc., is that you quite fancy a chance at being UN Secretary General.
Ha! So you can't go around and talk about, things that I've been talking about now for 30 years without a motivation being attached to it. I'm a big supporter of the United Nations, but I don't think that position's going to be headed down under.
If it were, though?
I don't think that position's heading down under.
Is that because you haven't got the support of the opposition, though?
I think I'd say again, I don't think that's the sort of position that it'll be heading down under. And I see myself as a small player on a very much larger stage, which is concerned about the future prosperity and, I believe, stability of the world.
Kevin Rudd, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on the programme.